Have you ever wanted to create more cards out of your crafting supplies? In this special compilation, we've gathered 8 inspiring tutorials that show many ways you can create with one set of supplies to create multiple beautiful handmade cards. Love playing with colour, texture and sparkle? You'll no doubt enjoy this tutorial made by the amazing Erica, as she plays with the Arabesque Medallion stamp set to create cards that have a similar design but are each unique in their own way.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Altenew YouTube channel. It's Erica with you today, and I thought we would take this Arabesque Medallion product suite. So there is a stamp set, there is a 3D embossing folder, there are layering stencils and a coordinating die cut. So I thought we'd take these products and we will make a bunch of cards. And I'm going to do a clean and simple, which comes very difficult to me. It's not easy for me. So I'm going to do that one first. And then we're going to get some layers and texture and sparkle and colors going. But I thought I'd start with the thing that I find the most difficult. So I kind of get that out of the way, and then we can just have some fun and let our creativity just go crazy. So I'm going to take the stamp set. I'm going to stamp this up with I'm thinking like a lighter shade of ink. So not a black, but maybe like Silverstone or something like that. And then we're going to add a little bit of color to it using the layering stencils, and then we're going to finish off very clean. We will see how it goes, but I'm going to do my best. So I'm going to grab some inks and things, and we're going to get right into it. So we're going to get right into it. Of course, we're going to use a stamp tool because I cannot do anything without a stamping tool. So this is the Stamp Wheel 2.0, so I wanted a bigger one because not only is my groupie mat slightly fresher and stickier in this one, but I also thought just in case I want to like move some panels around and whatever, then there was just a little bit more space here. So I'm gonna stamp this twice now just to kind of get like a nice solid image, but because of the gray ink, it gives such a nicer and softer look, I think. Now, here is one of the fun things, right? I am actually not going to use hardly any new ink. I am going to use pretty much just ink that is left over on my ink blending tools. I wanted a really, really soft, like dreamy blend, and sometimes you just cannot go wrong with like a bit of a pastel-y blend. And like I said, I am literally just using whatever is like left on my blending tools here. So when I feel like, oh, there isn't enough ink left on this tool, I just went and grabbed another one rather than adding more ink. I don't know if this is like a lazy girl ink blending or whether this is just a genius hack kind of thing. But I made sure not to use the same colors in the same areas because I wanted them all to, I wanted all of the colors to kind of gently blend into each other and sort of look very kind of almost not intentional, but intentional at the same time. I mean, that doesn't even really make any sense, but I'm hoping you're getting what I'm aiming for here, like soft, dreamy, and colors that all work together without kind of having any harsh lines. And I'm loving how this turned out. So we're going to keep this super simple. We're going to stamp a sentiment straight onto this so that it's a true like one layer card. And I did sprinkle a little bit of antique silver metallic ink on this because I can't resist shimmer. But yeah, super simple and done. Now we are going to grab our 3D embossing folder, and I am going to do 2 panels in white cardstock. So we're going to focus on those first, and we are going to obviously use our layering stencils here to add the colors. And first I thought, okay, we're going to go quite kind of soft and dreamy. So this time we're going to go for pinks, and these ones, I want to say that these is the rose petal color family, But I will make sure to link down below the correct one just to make sure that, you know, it's definitely the right color family. Now, some of my ink pads, I have the ovals, like the old oval shape rather than the newer round shape. So, but I will link the correct fresh dye ink color family in the description box down below so you get exactly the right one. And so we're gone kind of like soft pinky and then with like pops of darker pink here. And then I thought we're either gonna do this like super pink, but then I'm like, no. We're gonna add a little bit of turquoise rather than just going like more pink. And at first I thought maybe this color is just like a little bit too kind of like soft and gentle. And then it kind of became a little bit electric. I'm like, oh, I'm loving where this is going. So I decided to just stick with this. And I think it turned out really, really nice. So for this last layer, we're going to go slightly kind of more like pops of pink. So there's going to be a little bit of an ombre blending on the kind of like flower-esque bits. And then on some of the smaller details, we're going to add a little bit more color just to kind of like make them pop a little bit more. But that is the kind of ink blending of this one done. And I actually really, really like how this turned out. I'm not normally like a pink and blue on cards, but I think it works. Now for this one, this is like super sped up. This was like 5 minutes, I think, nearly, of ink blending, of like building up the color. Now, you can use a bigger blending tool. I don't know why I went with this little one. Like, rookie mistake, am I right? But this is just dusk. So this is just the one color. So, I mean, if you have like 4 of the shades of a blue or whatever color you want to do an ombre with, if you want to make it slightly easier for yourself, you can always use all 4 colors. But I decided to give myself a bit of a cardio workout, and I just used one. Now, I did use a little bit of antique gold metallic ink spray on this one, and it's been trimmed down a little bit and added to a white card base. And I did the same with this one. I trimmed it down a little bit, and then I've added that one with instant dimension foam tape. The sentiment is from the stamp set itself, so everything is all from this arabesque medallion like product suite. So apart from the bling-a-ling and the ink sprays and obviously the inks. But so there's 2 that are done with ink blending. And then I thought we're going to do one in Andromeda cardstock. And then we're going to take this platinum pigment ink pad. And we're just going to like rub it over the pattern. And it came out so cool. Like so cool. It kind of gives this like vintage kind of like gilded metal kind of detail, and I love how that ended up looking. But then, so I thought first, okay, are we gonna do this like just as a card as it is, with like a kind of, you know, trim it down and get a bit of a nice frame around it. But then I thought, oh, let's see how it looks cut out with the die cut, and OMG, I am so glad I did that, because oh, and I also cut out another piece of Morning Frost. So the one to the left is Moon Rock, and the one that I've used to kind of like stack it a little bit is slightly off center to just give it like a little bit of a shadow, is Morning Frost. Oh, it made all the difference. It just came out spectacular, if I may say so myself. So we're going to glue these up, and as I said, we're going to add this slightly kind of off center. So this is where you want to add your glue, not too much, but just enough so that everything will stick down flat. And then when we're flipping this over, you just need to kind of like, rather than just slapping it on top of each other, you need to kind of do it a little bit at a time to make sure that you get the same kind of amount of space sticking out on each one. Oh, it's definitely worth the extra time that it takes to like puzzle this together. It looks so good, and I'm not normally a like huge purple person, but how this turned out, yeah, I'm here for it for sure. So the sentiment for this one is heat embossed in platinum to kind of keep with the platinum ink and that. And then I have actually stamped up another one of the sentiments from the stamp set in black ink on a white piece of cardstock, and that I've just trimmed down to like a skinny little banner. And I wasn't expecting to like this card as much as I did, and I'm so glad that I took that time to kind of like experiment a little bit, because this came out so cool and I really love it. But now we're going to move on to yet another technique. So I have heat embossed the outline stamp onto iridescent vellum. Now the reason I used iridescent vellum is because I didn't have any like just plain vellum. I really wanted like a really thin vellum, but I didn't have any. So we are going to go with the iridescent one. And then we're going to grab some artist markers. I have gone for the Cottage Garden set. This is the N set. And you're going to need darker colors, so you don't need the lighter colors. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just like scribble on the back of the pattern, because it's gonna show through a little bit, not like crazy much. This is why you need the darker colors. Don't go for like the really light, like pretty pastels and things, because they're just not going to show through unless you have a really nice thin vellum. Yes. But then if you're going to heat emboss, make sure it's heat resistant, or, you know, you heat emboss just a little bit at a time, so that your vellum doesn't warp, because vellum is very, very iffy. It doesn't like heat and it doesn't like liquid. So yeah, so here we're going to add both. We're going to add the heat with the heat embossing, and then we're going to add some liquid with a liquid glue to add this to our card base later. So I'm really, really making it easy for myself here. However, this is a really, really fun technique. So here we're going to I'm going to show you just like quickly. You can kind of see like, you can see the colors through, but it's not like massively kind of different or anything like that. But you can see like in the places where I've used the 2 different shades of green, for instance, you can see that there are 2 different shades of green, but it's not really kind of super obvious which shades of green they are. So it's not super, super important to, you know, do like any shading or anything like this, especially when you're using a thicker vellum like I am. But if you are lucky and you find a thin vellum, you can actually create quite a like fun sort of stained glass window look. It's quite pretty. But so here, as you can see, we are all done. We're gonna use the die cut on this as well. I didn't think I was at first, because first I was like, oh, are we gonna just like put this onto like a card base with some gold splatters? But the gold splatters just didn't, you know, they don't show up. So we are going to use the die cut. We're gonna cut this out, and then we're gonna have some more fun. Yes, we are. So with that die cut, this gold background will make so much more sense, and it will work so much better. But we are going to move on to our second heat embossed panel. So I've got some of the watercolors from Altenew, and I've got the beautiful petal shaped ceramic tray as well. So with this panel, what I did was I stamped the image sort of like slightly off the panel, as you can see, so it's not like completely in the middle. I stamped this in, I believe it was the Silverstone ink, and then I have used a clear embossing ink on top, so that the outlines are all like embossed, so I can actually like play around with the watercolors a little bit here. So we're just gonna kind of like paint this very loosely. We're not gonna worry about it too much. And also, one thing with watercolors is that if you think, oh, that's very like pigmented, very like dark, once it dries, it will settle down a little bit. So like, don't worry too much about it. If you don't like the look of it, like if it dries and you think, oh, I'm not sure about that, what you can do is just go in with a clean water brush and like dilute the color a little bit. But you can also start very, very pale and then let it dry, and then you can actually build up another layer on top if you want. But I just wanted to like go very kind of easy breezy, because normally like with stained glass, it's not very shaded. It's kind of very blocky. So that was kind of the look I was going for. So I'm nearly done here, and we're going to leave this to dry. But so like comparing this now when it's nice, and I say nice and wet, when it's wet, and then we're going to get it here where it's dry, you can see that the colors have really sort of settled down and kind of like faded almost. So we're going to take the die cut. We're going to cut this out. We're going to add another 3 layers, and I've used some scrap pieces of cardstock to like build up the layer rather than using like just white cardstock. I've used some like scraps. So here I thought, maybe this will look nice with a gold splattered background. But then I thought, well, no, we're going to have the gold with the gold embossed panel, and then we're going to do another panel with the silver, antique silver spray. So we can have splatters on both. We're just, you know, different colors. And we're going to add another little sentiment to this as well. But on this one, we're not actually going to add a big one. We're just going to have this thin strip of a sentiment, and we're going to add it onto like the little white bit at the bottom, and then we're going to sprinkle a few little gem sparkles on this just to make it a little bit extra sparkly, but that's for a little bit later. But so yeah, this one is actually one of the few cards that ends up with just a very like thin little sentiment strip rather than one of the big like kind of like kapow sentiments. But I wanted to do something like a little bit different, so I didn't want to do everything like samey. So you can really see like just how versatile this like product suite is. And again, I probably said it twice already, but every single card in this video is made just with the stamp set or the layering stencils or the 3D embossing folder or the die cut. There are no other like stamps or dies or anything like that for these cards whatsoever. And I'm going to show you all of the cards at the end so that you can see like, you know, just how like different results you can actually get from all of these as well. But so here we have our other, or the second heat embossed panel, the one with the vellum. So I put the big thanks in the middle, and then I've also heat embossed another little sentiment just to like make it say a little bit more than just thanks. So that has been added right underneath the sentiment there. Well, you know that I had to add some bling-a-ling to our cards. And first off, we have got one of my favorite gem sparkle mixes, which is the smoky quartz. You can see I've got barely nothing left in here. And I've used this on our gray and purple card to kind of like really highlight the pattern and just kind of like draw the eye in a little bit more. So I think this choice worked out pretty well. Works quite well with like the platinum of the heat embossing there as well, and the platinum pigment ink on the embossed cardstock as well. So that's card number 1. And I have used some deep sea sapphire, the lightest color, and just relatively little actually. So just in the corners to kind of like frame the whole thing in. Because they're very light, very little sparkle. Surprising for me, for sure. Next up, I have used the very few metallic gold gem sparkles that I've got left, and as it stands now, I've got 4 little ones left and 1 big one, and then I'm all out of gold metallic gem sparkles. But I think it worked out all right. So here again, I've used them to kind of like highlight the patterns and like where it kind of makes sense rather than just kind of like sprinkling them all over. So again, this kind of like drawing the eye in to our sentiment here. Next up is the crystal clear gem sparkles. These ones are super versatile because they have no color, so they just work with like everything. And here I've gone a little bit more Erica-esque of the number of sparkles, but this is also our kind of like 7-layer bean dip kind of card, you know. So we've got sparkles in the background, we got the heat embossing, we got the layers, we got the sentiment, we have some sparkles and the watercoloring and all of that. So yes, I think this works okay too. And then on our vellum card, I have actually used rose gold Stella sequins. And the reason I did that is because it kind of like all of the colors on the vellum here, it just sort of like, it looks really vivid on the back, but once you put it down, and because this is kind of like iridescent, it's a little bit more opaque than like my old type of vellum. So it kind of gives this sort of very like rose gold look to it. So I thought the rose gold Stella sequins was just like the perfect mix for those. The only card that we don't actually have any sparkles on is our clean and simple card, because it's got the splatters on there. So we're going to keep it very, very simple. Now, if you go and check out the blog post, there's actually a bonus card, a 7th card. Yes, because I really was on a roll. I've had so much fun with this pattern and like trying all sorts of different like techniques. And yeah, it's just, honestly, I could have kept going, but I didn't want to keep you like hostage here for like ages and ages and ages. So we're going to leave it at our 6 cards actually showing. And then if you do want to see the 7th card, make sure you check out the blog post over on the Altenew blog. And I will see you soon again. Bye!
If you have the Stamp Wheel 2.0, this next one is for you. Join Erin as she stamps once with one of Altenew's massive stamp sets. Ink blends to perfection and does it all with the help of the trusty Stamp Wheel 2.0 to make 2 sets of cards and matching envelopes.
Hi everyone, this is Iram, and today I have a fun and efficient card making idea to share with you. We are going to create coordinated cards and envelopes all in one go using a large floral stamp. Let's get started. For this project, I'll be using the brand new Sakura Blossoms stamp set. It also comes with a simple coloring stencil and a 3D embossing folder, though we won't actually be using the embossing folder today. This set is actually just a bit bigger than the Stamp Wheel 2.0, so to make everything fit just right, I'm placing 2 sticky mats, the smaller one and the 9x12 one, right on top. That's my usual trick. But since I have the slim grip mat on my stamp wheel, I found that sliding a medium-sized watercolor palette under that smaller mat really helped level things out perfectly. You'll see me pop that in a little later, once I've got the cardstock all positioned. Now, depending on how you decide to lay everything out, you could easily create 4 card panels or even more from this. But I really wanted to try something a little different. So I positioned 2 A2 panels side by side along with 2 envelopes. This way I can finish those coordinating envelopes all in one go. I also decided to place a mask, just a simple post-it note. It did take me a couple of tries to get that stamping on the envelopes just right. Since envelopes have those extra folds and layers, you have to be a bit mindful, but it really wasn't difficult at all. So I moved the panels and the envelopes onto the 9x12 Alpha Sticky mat. However, I didn't place the envelopes correctly, especially the pumpkin pie one. So you will see me adjust my stencils when inking the flowers on that envelope. I will start by applying Coral Berry Fresh Dye ink, starting from the center of the flower and working outwards. I will try to leave a very small area on the tips of the petals with little ink. When I ink over the envelopes, I will make sure to apply the ink with a heavy hand. Once the flower petals have coral berry on them, use a microblending brush to apply Snapdragon Fresh Dye ink to the petal tips. This is your preference. You can apply it to some or all of the petals. Blend it into pink to create a really hot, vibrant shade, or add a hint of this color. I chose to blend it with the pink for most of the petals. Remember to apply the ink with a heavy hand when inking over the envelopes. Next, use Cosmic Berry Fresh Dye ink and apply it to the center of each flower, keeping it contained on most flowers, but extend it for the flowers or petals beneath other flowers. Repeat the same with stencil 2, 3, and 4, making sure you add more Cosmic Berry to the flowers that are behind other flowers. Now place stencil 5 and apply Milk Chocolate Fresh Dye ink through the anthers, the little dots over the flowers, and also to the branch, starting by adding darker inking to the bottom edge and lighter to the top. For the leaves, use Honey Glow Fresh Dye ink as the base and Sugar Kelp Fresh Dye ink to add dimension and depth. You will notice that I'm moving my stencil and adjusting it for inking over different areas. It's the placement of the envelopes that I mentioned earlier. So when you do this, don't remove the panels and envelopes from your stamp wheel and ink them there only. Now on to the final stencil, stencil 6. I will change things up a bit here. I will start by adding honeydew glow to the leaves and the branch since I accidentally applied it to the top bit of the branch. And it's okay. So I went ahead and applied more of it to the top edge of the branches. Next, I added sugar kelp to the base of the leaves. After this, I used milk chocolate to add to the branches, especially applying it to the bottom edge. Now that the stencil is done, I will carefully remove all the pieces from this alpha sticky mat. First, I'm going to start working on that pumpkin pie envelope. I'll be using the Flex calligraphy pen to trace along the bottom edge and just partially up the sides of the post-it note. It did end up a little bit crooked, so I'm just going to go back in, make those lines a bit thicker to straighten everything out. Then to give it more of a hand-drawn look, I am adding some little dots and specks, mostly because I accidentally touched the wet obsidian ink and it smudged on that right flower. But honestly, I just love control splatters, or really splatters in any form. I'm going to add some dots to the coral berry envelope as well, though I'll skip showing that in the video. To make this one stand out, I'm using white pen to add little dots to the flowers, really highlighting those anthers. To make sure everything matches perfectly, I'll go ahead and highlight the anthers on the coordinating card as well. For our second panel, I'm using carbon black gouache to add some splatters. For the sentiment, I decided to heat emboss it in white on black cardstock, and then adhered it vertically to the right. I thought that looked really cool. I really hope you enjoyed today's project and found it helpful. If you try this technique, I would love to see what you create. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
We love the huge stamp collections here at Altenew, and if you do too, this next tutorial is a must try. Create 4 beautiful cards using just one Sakura Blossom stamp set to reduce waste and save time. I am going to be using our new and huge stamp set with the coordinating stencils to create 4 different cards with just one image. So this is the stamp set. This is the Sakura Blossoms stamp set. It is so pretty. Now in this stamp set we have a huge branch of Sakura or cherry blossom, and then we have another kind of singular cluster as well as lots of different sentiments in here. I am going to be using my stamp wheel 2.0 to stamp the image because it is huge, and I'm going to need to do this on a full 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock. So what I'm going to do to kind of raise up this little base off to the side a little bit is I'm going to use a couple of the watercolor palettes from Altenew. I did find that 3 of those kind of stacked together worked perfectly, and I use these palettes all the time for my watercoloring and kind of just using some mixed media stuff. I'm then going to remove the original mat out of my stamp wheel 2.0 and use my huge sticky mat, and I'm just going to pop that into place. It may need a little bit of a squidge round the edges, but it will fit in. You can see that I'm just using my nails just to kind of tuck it in to make sure it's all nice and flat on there. So you can see now that I've got a bigger work surface to work on. I'm then going to take a large piece of cardstock, so this is a 8.5 by an 11, and I'm just going to place that into my stamp wheel, and this is where I'm going to stamp that huge image and create 4 different panels in one go. So I have that nicely in place. I'm then going to bring in my image, and you can see just how large this is. It is so detailed. There is so many blooms on this. I haven't counted them, but there are just lots and lots. You could definitely just use a portion of this if you didn't want to kind of extend your stamp wheel 2.0. It's completely up to you how you want to use this. So once I have that in place onto my flip plate, what I'm going to do is I am going to stamp it. I'm using my favorite black ink of all time, and this is the obsidian ink that we have. As you can see, all I'm doing is just tapping that all over this huge image, and you're seeing just how big and detailed this is. I do have a few of the pieces just on this side here that are kind of hanging off my flip plate, but I'll show you how to stamp those as well. So I'm just going to pop that into position into my stamp wheel, and I am going to press this down all over. You're going to want to make sure that you are adding more pressure along that kind of little gap that we have between the stamp wheel 2.0 and the palettes. For these pieces that are hanging over, I did use a block, as you can see, and then just use my finger to kind of do the places that I couldn't get with the block, and it's stamped really, really well. I'm then adding in that small cluster as well. I wanted to make sure that this panel wasn't kind of as empty as it looked when I had just stamped the large image. So I'm just going to place that into position. I did at the end cut everything out. So in theory, I could have just placed this in that huge area and not worried about the placement of this, but I did. I thought that that panel was going to be a one layer panel, but in the end it didn't turn out to be that way. So I'm just going to ink this up again with my obsidian ink, and then we can stamp that into position. So I'm just finishing off stamping that. I did ink this up very, very well. So as you can see, this is going to stamp perfectly. I'm just going to flip that over and then stamp that into place. I do end up kind of being a little bit more aggressive than I need to be with this. I'm not sure why, but as you can see, that stamped perfectly. Now, I am sorry, everyone. I did kind of miss the start of this where I started doing the blending. But I do have the camera on now. So I am using different kind of shades for the flowers. I went with 3 different kind of colors for this. So for the yellow, I am going to be using, I have the Peachy Glow and the Golden Honeycomb. So I'm using the Peachy Glow all over the kind of background piece, and then adding the Golden Honeycomb just to the center of that flower. For the kind of pinky orangey flowers, we have the orange sorbet all over the petals, and then the pink pearl just in the center of the petals. And then for the more pinky flowers, we have pink pearl and then coral bliss. And as you can see, I am just going through the stencils and just adding these color combinations to the flowers. So I have the yellow flowers, I have the orangey pink ones, and then the pinky ones as well. So I did want to kind of just stick to those ones just to give us that a little bit of a variation, but not too much. But if you wanted to, you could definitely go all out. You could have different rainbow colored flowers. Now, these stencils are gonna do petals at a time, so that means that when you add the color through these, you're going to get a beautiful kind of natural look where the ink is more dark around the edges of the petals, which is very, very pretty. So I am just going to keep going with all of these stencils. You do get a lot of stencils in here to make sure that all of the various parts of these flowers are colored, and it just looks stunning. It does take a little bit of time to kind of go through all of the stencils. I'm not gonna lie, it did take a little bit of time, but it is so worth it to think that you can definitely make 4 cards out of this. Or if you wanted to, you could definitely make a full-on art print for anywhere in your home or a friend's home. You could definitely make gifts from this one. So this one here that I have, I believe this is the last stencil for the flowers. Now on each of these stencils you do have a piece of, or the whole piece of the large branch, and then also in the corner you have the layers for the little flower cluster as well. So you're going to get those on each of the stencils. So you're going to be able to kind of colour in that, the large piece, and also the small piece. So it only takes a little bit of lining up on the small piece if you have that on the same piece as well. We also have another stencil or 2 for the leaves and stems, and you can see that we're just going to pop that into place. You can see that as well as using my sticky mat, I'm also using a little bit of tape. That's because the stencil is exactly the same size as the piece of cardstock, so it didn't quite fit onto my sticky mat as much as I wanted. For the browns, I am using Ginger Root and Umber Shadow inks, and for the greens, Misty Sage and Mossy Shadow. So you can see that we have all of those different colours in there. I love mixing colours for different pieces and having a number of different shades on one area. It's going to give you so much interest and just dimension that way. I'm using the same kind of browny green colours for the centers of the flowers, but you could use some pastes if you wanted a lighter one. So if you wanted some kind of gold or white stamens, you could definitely use our pastes for that. That would be really, really cool. I then wanted to add a little bit more detail and dimension to these flowers. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to grab my watercolor pencils and I'm just going to use them as pencils. So I'm not going to be adding any water to these. And I'm just adding a couple of extra flicks and strokes from the inside of the petal outwards and then the outside of the petal inwards. And this is going to give the look of some ruffles, a little bit more dimension. It's going to take you a little bit of time, but not too much effort. I think that this is a very relaxing thing to do. So I am going to show you how I do this on a couple of the flowers, and then I am going to speed it up because this did take a little while. So for the yellow colours flowers that you can see, I am going to be using 2 pencils, but then I only ended up using 1 pencil for the pinky flowers. So if you just wanted to use 1 yellow one, that's totally fine. The yellow ones that I'm using are yellow and also the chrome yellow from the watercolor pencils. And as you can see, I'm just going through flower by flower, petal by petal, adding 1 or 2, maybe 5 strokes from the outside, from the base of the flower to up the petals, and then just around the outside edge. Like I said, it does take a little bit of time, but you can see how much kind of interest and depth that this is giving, just adding those couple of extra strokes to the base of the petals. You can see how one flower that I've done looks a lot different to one that I haven't done. So I'm just going to keep going with this. I did all of my yellows first. Again, I did use that yellow and also chrome yellow. And then for the pinks, for the darker one that I've gone for first, I am going to be using the Pink Madder Lake. So I'm just adding a couple of little details to each of the petals, making sure that I don't leave one petal out, because it would be very, very lonely if I didn't give him a little bit of added or a little bit of extra attention. And then for the lighter pink flowers, I'm going to go for a lighter pink, and that is the light coral. And again, that colour is from the woodless watercolor pencils that we have in store. I do think that this is one of those kind of little crafty jobs that you could do in front of the TV, and it just goes really quickly when you do it that way. So here is the overall piece all close up, and it does look fabulous. So we are going to work ahead and get these cut into panels. So I'm just using my paper trimmer to cut the whole piece of cardstock in half and then cut these halves in half again, and that is going to give you 4 panels for cards. You could use them exactly as they are. These are so pretty. I think that just sticking these onto some card bases or note cards and giving them as a little gift would be a great thing to do. So say for Mother's Day, you wanted to give her a little gift that she could then send out. This would be great, just adding little sentiments into a little bag so she can choose what sentiments to pop on afterwards is another great option. So I then decided, after I'd cut all the panels, that I then wanted to add even more dimension. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut all of these out. I know, I do love some fussy cutting. So for the first one, I have cut the whole of the panel out. For this second panel, what I wanted to do was create a kind of focal panel in the center, but then have the images that go over the panel be cut out. So what I'm doing is I am taking my ruler and a pencil, and I'm just marking 3/4 of an inch all the way around. I'm trying not to go over the flowers because I do not want to mark any of this, and I also just want to kind of mark gently where I am going. So as you can see, where there are flowers, I'm not going to be adding any pencil marks. I'm just adding the pencil marks to where the panel is going to be. Hopefully this makes sense when I start trimming out. So as you can see, I am just doing 3/4 of an inch all the way around the sides and just kind of marking the panel that I want to stay in place. So once I have marked that panel, all of the outside pieces are going to be cut off and the inside panel is going to be fine. So I'm just going to cut along those lines, but making sure not to go over any of the flowers. So I've done 2 pieces. This piece here, it did end up going quite close to the flowers, so I'm just going in between them, and the same over here. Not a lot of cutting to do there with my little knife, but then what I'm going to want to do is cut around the flowers, and this is going to keep all of the flowers, the branches, the leaves, everything intact completely. The only thing that is getting cut off is the outside edge of that little panel that we have in the center. So I am going around with my scissors. These are my favorite scissors to cut out with. The fine detail scissors are really good as well, but I'm just used to these ones and how they work with the little spring in them. This part here was a little bit difficult to get to with my scissors, so I've gone in again with my craft knife just to go around all of those images so we can get rid of all those little landlocked areas, as they're called, in those little places there. I do find that using a craft knife can be a little bit scary, but don't be. As long as you are careful and you kind of move your paper more than your knife, I find that that's the easiest way to go about it. So I'm just finishing off the little piece there, and as you can see, the panel is intact on the inside, but the overhanging pieces of the flowers and the branch are still there. For this next one, I wanted to do the same technique as before, but just do it as a panel along, or a border along the outside edge. So what I've done is I have marked off 1 inch, and I am going to be doing exactly the same as before. So along that inch line, I have cut straight along where there aren't any flowers, but then where there is flowers, I'm going to kind of cut away with my knife. There was some tiny little pieces within these flowers. I don't think that you need to cut out all the tiny pieces if you don't want to, but I did. And you know what? I enjoyed it. This really made me happy to kind of create this. It has been a while since I've done some really fussy cutting and making sure that everything's up to that edge. For this next one, I went all out and I am going to cut out all of these images. And then instead of arranging them exactly like they are on this panel, I'm actually going to arrange them differently on my end piece. So once I have done all of my cutting, it's time to pop these all together. For one of the panels, the one that we have the border along the outside been cut out, I am going to add some black and white striped paper along that edge that we have the kind of cut out from. I'm then going to add some of the foam tape on the back of this panel, making sure not to go over any of those cutouts. And then I'm just going to pop that panel onto the card base, and just look how cool that looks there. For the next one, I am going to be adding a coloured card base here. This is just sage stone cardstock, and then I'm going to add this panel on top. Again, I have some of that more instant dimension foam tape there, and I'm just going to line up the outside edge of those flowers that are going to touch the top and the left side. So that is the second panel completed. I'm then going to move on to the third one. This one does have some ultra sticky tape on there because we are going to be sticking down a kind of textured panel here. I found some of the wood grain textured cardstock in my drawer and I wanted to use it. I thought it was pretty. So I'm just using that. You could use one of our press plates. It does have that fabulous wood grain texture, and if you did that into some watercolor cardstock, you would get the same look. Again, I'm adding the kind of the flowers, the fussy cut flowers, not die cut, fussy cut flowers into place onto that one. And I'm then going to add some chamomile cardstock to this next card base. I did have to trim off some edges on that one. But then I'm taking these beautiful fussy cut pieces. Remember the ones that were kind of all random over that panel? I then wanted to kind of move them around so I can really play with these. Now that I've cut them out, you don't have to have them exactly where they were beforehand. A lot of these pieces were quite fiddly because I had to cut them down, but you can see just how pretty this is looking. I didn't get rid of any of the pieces and nothing went to waste. Everything's just perfect on here, and I love that dark background that we have as well. So to finish these panels, I had a bunch of ready-made kind of foiled press plate sentiments from Cascading Vines, Flowering Hedge, and also One Go Solid Sentiments. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some of those to the panels, and here are the cards complete. You can see just how beautiful each of these cards are, and they are all very different. I truly am in love with how different these look, and this stamp set was so fun to play with. Love getting more out of your die cuts? What if we told you there's a tutorial that can show you how to create 8 cards with them? Join me in this video to learn how. I have tons of different cards to share with you today, and I'm sure that if you keep hopping along, you're going to get more inspiration as well too. So to start with, I am going to be using lots of different colours of cardstock. So I have Lagoon, Volcano Lake, Hunter Green, Just Green, Sweet Leaf, Frosty Pink, Coral Bliss, Coral Berry, Heartbeat, Pastel Sunrise, Rouge, Shattered Shell, Peachy Glow, Buttercream, Pumpkin Pie, and Chamomile. So there are a lot of colours there. So for the greens and the blue colours that I have, I'm going to be using these for the foliage, and I have added some double-sided adhesive on the back of all of those. For all of the pinks, the reds, the creams, and the kind of yellow colours, I am going to be using those for the flowers. And again, I have added some double-sided adhesive to the back of all of those as well. So this is going to mean that when I cut these out using the die cut, I am going to technically make my own little stickers, which is really cool. So the die that I'm going to be using is the Creative Cuts Botanical Waltz, and I have fallen in love with this die. It is so whimsical, a little bit magical, and it could be very pop arty if you want. And I think that with some of the cards that I have created, I could definitely recreate these just to use as a print on my wall. So I'm really excited to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take all of the flower dies out of the set, and I'm going to cut these from each of those colors that I have at the top. So that's all of the pinks, all of the reds, all of the creams, and all of the yellows. And I'm going to cut each and every flower piece from those. So you can see that I have done that. It did take me a little while, but I'm so happy that I have all these, that I get to play with all of these different colors. And that one, and then for the greens and the blues, what I've done is I've cut the leaf die, which cuts lots of different leaves at the same time, 3 times out of half of the cardstock. So the cardstock pieces that I have are half of the 8.5 by 11. So I have cut that 3 times. So I've got lots of different foliage to use. And as you can see, we have the double-sided adhesive on the back of that. So all I need to do is remove that, and then I don't even need to worry about adding wet glue or anything like that to the back. It makes kind of putting these cards together a lot quicker and a lot cleaner. If I use wet glue, I do tend to get a little bit sticky. So for the first set of cards that we have, so this, I'm going to be able to create 4 different cards out of this background piece that I'm creating here. I have a piece of black cardstock, and it is half of the 8.5 by 11. So what it is 8.5 by 5.5, I believe. So this is going to enable me to create lots of different ones just using this. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be using the leaves and the foliage pieces that we have, and I'm just arranging these on that black background in something that makes me happy. I'm not going to show you the whole of the process of creating this background, but I do want to kind of show you the main pieces. Once I have added enough of the foliage onto the background, I then kind of went round and cut off the other pieces, and I kind of added those around the outside edge just to fill in any gaps. I'm then going to go ahead and add in some flowers directly on top of this. Now, the flowers don't necessarily have a flower center. So for the flower center, I wanted to make sure that I was getting the black from the background popping through. But if you wanted to, and if you kind of got to a point where you were struggling to find a place for the flower that was not giving you the kind of hole or the background color that you wanted to, you could actually cut the little flower centers out of the black just using the smallest layer of the flower. So what I did was I tried to just add them to the background one by one, just building the layers there, but it was taking me quite a while. So what I did off screen is I just layered all of the flowers up and all of the little buds up as well. What I just did was made sure that I didn't have the same color on any part of one flower. So I have a mix of the pinks, the reds, the yellows, and the creams, and I just find that this really made me happy just to do this. It sat there so relaxing, but then I have all of these different pieces that I can use, which is quite quick, just to remove the back piece of adhesive and then just add them into place onto my background. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make little flower clusters. I'm not trying to cover the whole of the background because I do want some of that bold black background coming through, but I also want to see all of those little leaves that we've put on there as well. I think I did add a little bit too many leaves on this one, and if I was to do it again, I would definitely hold back on the amount of foliage that I was putting down first. As I don't want to waste any of these pieces, you can see here that I've added one of those flowers on the edge just to make it look like a continuous pattern. But then when I've snipped that off, I'm just going to move that somewhere else just to cover in another edge. So don't think that when you kind of snip those off, you need to get rid of them. Don't, definitely don't. You're going to be able to get more bang for your buck if you do use the little offset pieces that you're going to get as well. So I am just playing around with this. I didn't really have a plan on what was happening at this point. I just knew I wanted to create a beautiful background with these colors that I have, and I wanted it to be nice and bold and bright. So I'm just going to keep going with this, kind of just coming out from that center point that I had over one side and just playing around with the colors. Again, I don't want to miss any of these pieces that are overhanging, so I'm just going to kind of cut those off and add them into place. And here is the panel all finished up. So once I had finished this, I then wanted to be able to create multiple cards out of this one. For the first card, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this in half. So it's going to cut it down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm just going to choose one of these little pieces that we have here to create a full background on the back of a card base. So the card base is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I've just added some of the ultra sticky tape on there, and I'm just going to pop that into place, and you can see just how pretty that is. It would make such a beautiful kind of print in my craft room. I am going to recreate this later on. And then for the second one, what I'm going to do is I am going to cut a strip. It's around about 2 inches. As you can see, because of the thickness of all of the different cardstocks that we've got there, it was a little difficult to get through it, but we did manage it. And that's just going to have a strip on the top of that one. So again, like before, I am just going to adhere this to a card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 with some ultra sticky tape. You can move this around to see which kind of piece that you want, but all of the pieces are too pretty not to use, so it doesn't matter where it goes. So for the other piece, I've cut this down onto a panel that has around about 3/4 of an inch around on each side. So I just cut the panel, and I have added this on foam tape this time round to have a little bit of dimension. And I'm just trying to keep the border around the outside of the note card just kind of equal on everything there, and you can see just how pretty that looks there. So we have 3 different looks at the minute, and then we also have this little strip that we are gonna use to create a different card. For my next idea, I wanted to create a shaped card. So I have the largest of the nesting arches, and I've cut 2 of those out of the acai berry cardstock. And then I've cut another smaller arch out of Classic Crest, or the white cardstock, so I can add that on the inside of the card, so I have somewhere that I can write the message. So to create the shaped card, all I'm doing is I'm adding that arch onto my scoreboard, and I'm scoring around about 1.5 inches at the top of the arch. So this is going to create a little flap that we have there, which is going to be the hinge for our card, and our card's going to be able to stand up perfectly. You do not need to do both, you just need to do the one that's going to be at the back of the card. When I had done that, I then wanted to cut along this little white one to make sure that that's not doubled up on that kind of folded edge. So I just marked it with my fingernail, and then I'm just going to trim the top off that. You could cut a square if you wanted to. You didn't necessarily need to use the arch for that one. So what I'm going to do is I am going to fold the score line back, and we're going to adhere that flap in a little minute. And all I'm going to do is add some of the ultra sticky tape onto the back of this little white piece, which is going to be where we're going to be able to add our message. Again, trying to keep the little border around the outside fairly even. And then because I want to be able to kind of manipulate this, I want to be able to kind of open and close the card multiple times. Instead of using some dry glue, I am going to use wet glue. So this is the glue. I'm just adding that to the top flap. Then I'm going to pop the 2 arches together and then hold that top piece till the glue sets, and we have a nice bond. So once it has set, you are going to be able to kind of stand that up, and it is going to be very, very cool. So as before, I am adding the foliage down first. Technically, you could add whatever you wanted to, but I'm just going to add some of the foliage to kind of get me out of the plain background straight away, so I can kind of see how things are gonna go. I am speeding this up because you see me kind of put the first one together, and I don't think that you need to watch me do all of these different kind of backgrounds when they're technically the same. The only thing that's a little bit different is the shape that we're working on, and also the background color. So all I'm doing is kind of working in a different kind of clusters this time round. I have a cluster at the bottom right, I have a cluster at the top left, and I'm just going to add a little cluster on this right hand side as well, just to give it a little bit more of a balance. I am going to mix and match all of the different foliage pieces. Every time I put one down, I try not to use the same color, just to give me a little bit more of a natural variation when I am working with it. And once I had added all of the pieces, I did go around the outside and kind of chop them off, but I have saved them, so I am going to be able to use them on a different project as well. So that is the kind of 5th card, or the 5th look done, although we haven't used the strip from the first set yet, so don't worry. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to create a panel on my card this time around using the beautiful Arctic mountain. So I have cut this little panel. It's around about the same size as the black one that I had before, but I wanted to do these differently. So I have a full piece which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and then I have another piece which I have cut 3/4 of an inch from the bottom and the side off. And what I'm doing is I'm creating these 2 panels in the same way at the minute, but I am going to kind of diversify while we are creating afterwards, because I don't want any of these cards to be exactly the same. So as you can see, I'm mixing and matching all of the colors with all of the different greens that I have, and the 2 beautiful teal colors, which I just think brighten this up immensely. So once I'm happy with the kind of amount of foliage that I had in the background, what I then am going to do is I'm just going to go around the outside edge on both of these and cut off any of the overhanging pieces of foliage. It did take a little minute just to do this and create these 2 backgrounds, but they are so pretty. You could definitely just go with this if you wanted to, if you didn't want to add the flowers as well. So for this small panel, my idea was that all of the kind of foliage pieces would be contained within the panel, but the flowers themselves, I wanted to kind of overhang the panel, but not overhang the card. So you can see when I'm adding those in, I'm trying to overhang them a little bit on the small panel, but not too much. I don't want to have to cut any of these pieces off. I want full flowers on all of that panel. But for the larger panel that we have, I am going to go ahead and cut off all of the overhanging pieces so I can reuse them. Now you can see that I did cut lots and lots of the flowers. I probably went a little bit overboard, and I did not use probably half of them. So I still have lots and lots of these to use on other projects. So I'm really excited to kind of see what else I can do with them. I'm definitely going to create something for my craft room though. And you can see that I did bring in other pieces that I'd cut from various other panels, and I am going to keep them as well. I'm not going to waste it. So this is the little panel, and you can see that we have that border around the outside edge, but it is going to be broken up by those flowers. I'm adding some double-sided foam onto the back of this panel, but I wanted to pop this up. But before I do that, so I don't have anything sticking to the back of these flowers, which were technically little stickers, little cardstock stickers, I'm just taking some talc and I'm running that around the outside, the back side of them, and that is going to take away the stick. So if you were wondering what I was doing there, that's talc, and it will remove adhesive. So if you wanted to kind of create a not sticker with a sticker, just use some talc on it, and you're going to be able to use that sticker and add some instant dimension foam tape on there to pop it up. So I'm just adding in my panel, making sure that we have a even border around this outside, and I just think that that is so pretty. So for this piece, this is the larger piece that we have, the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm taking one of the nesting arches dies, and I'm just cutting that from this panel. I have added it to a place that I want it to be on the background, and it didn't quite go through all of those numerous cardstock layers that we have. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to gently and carefully just trim along the line that it has imprinted. It very nearly went through, but because we do have a lot of cardstock, it didn't go through it all, so I just needed to kind of trim some of those. So for one of the looks that we're going with this panel, I have added some ultra sticky tape onto the back of the largest piece, and I am just going to add that onto a card base. I've also cut a slightly larger arch just out of white cardstock, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that on later on, and this is where I'm going to add on my sentiment. So for the other piece where we have the kind of decorative arch, I am going to add a background, and I'm just using the Paper Rhythm 3D embossing folder, and I have a piece of cardstock which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm just embossing that piece just to add a little bit of texture to the background. I'm adding some ultra sticky tape to the back of a card base, so this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, just adding that embossed panel on, and then I'm going to add the flower arch using some of the Instant Dimension foam tape. Just going to add it in round about the same place it came from the other card, but you could add this wherever you wanted to. You don't need these to match in any way, shape or form. Just going to move those over to the side, and then we're going to go ahead and kind of put the rest of the cards together. So this was from the first set of, or first look of cards that we created, and we had a strip along the top. I just cut a piece of white cardstock just to kind of pop that up above, at the bottom of the card base, because I just think that finishes it off a little bit better. And I am going to add on a foiled sentiment. I'm using a mix of sentiments that I've already hot foiled, and these sentiments are from different sets. I'll give you the name of the sets now. I have a mix of the Scripty sentiments from Flowering Hedge Registration Press Plate in a mix of kind of gold tones. I also have the Scripty sentiments Love You and Thank You from the Cascading Vines press plate. And then I have a huge mix of the One Go sentiments 1, 2, and 3. I went crazy while I was creating a lot of hot foiling sentiments. It just makes me happy to do it all in one go, and then that means I can really play around with the different sentiments that I do use on my cards. So for that strip that we had before, what I have here is I have cut a strip out of some jet black cardstock, and I am going to be adding that with foam tape onto some of the citrine glitter cardstock, and this is going to add a little bit more of a sparkle to this one here. So I'm just going to add that with a little bit of border top and bottom. I'm then going to add the strip and also a strip sentiment from one of the One Grow sentiment strips, and that is going to kind of go completely near enough across, and that's going to give me another look, but with that tiny piece of that beautiful background that we created. So what I'm trying to do is just add this onto a card base. So I have the little strips that we've added together, and then these two. I am going to add these two, this sentiment strip, using some foam tape to kind of pop that a little bit up. And then for the strip itself, I am going to use some of the ultra sticky tape to add that on. So now you can see that we have 4 different looks with the black background that we created. And then moving on to our shaped card, and you can see that it's nicely dry and it will stand up perfectly. And I'm just going to add one of the large kind of block sentiments from the One Go sentiment strips just into place onto kind of the side piece there, and I'm just using some foam tape to add that on as well. I am loving the look of these beautifully foiled sentiments with that bold background. So for these ones, all I need to do is kind of finish this card off a little bit. I'm just going to add some foam behind that pre-cut kind of arch from before, and then pop that down. And I am going to do like I did with the black background ones, and I am trying to mix and match the different sentiments to give us different looks on each of the cards. So this large one here is from the registration plate, and you can see just how pretty that is there. So that is going to finish that card off. I also like to layer up one of these large scripty sentiments with one of the strip sentiments as well. Just gives a different look as well, so you can definitely kind of create your own custom sentiments by layering and matching different ones together. So for the panel one, I did go for one of the sentiment strips, and then for the other one we have the one that I actually fussy cut out to add that into place. So there is another 3 looks. So out of all of those backgrounds, I have managed to create 8 different looks, and you can see that those ones are kind of opposite of each other, and I'm loving the kind of look of having those flowers just popping slightly off that contained panel on there. So there we have it, 8 different looks using the same flowers and leaf die cuts, but with different bold coloured backgrounds. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this and that it's inspired you to get out your die cuts and just get creating. One of the classic card making colour schemes you can go to is white and gold. They're wonderful for any occasion, and in this tutorial, Erica is going to teach you how to easily create multiple cards with a fun, clean and simple theme.
Hi everyone, it's Erica back on the Altenew YouTube channel. I know, so soon again, woohoo! Hopefully you'll think it's a treat, because today we are going to embrace the fact that the holidays are literally around the corner. I have been in denial far too long, and I've been putting this off because I live in the south of Spain, so it's actually sunny and a smidge cold, but sunny and green still, so it's kind of hard to get into the holiday spirit. However, I thought we would put a couple of cards together using a very simple color scheme. We're not going to go crazy with like greens and yellows and reds and blues and whatever have you. We are going to do white and gold. That's it. Maybe a smidge of silver, because I wanted to use some of the pigment ink for using some of the press plates, but I only have platinum, silver and bronze. And so I have actually tried using silver on this gorgeous terrazzo something texture plate, and look at that beautifulness. Oh, loving that. But if you don't want to use ink, you could just use the plate as a embossing plate and then splatter some gold on top, you know, for a very simple look. If you're not into that kind of look, then there's also this one using this gorgeous kind of like wood grain press plate. And I have again just kind of used it as an embossing plate and to kind of create that sort of texture as well. But I think we might use this side actually, because it's just more beautiful on this side. So I think we're going to use that side. Now, if you don't have the letterpress system, but you have a die cutting machine, you can always use an embossing folder. And I mean, you can't get more sort of like cozy and wintry than the Cozy Sweater 3D embossing folder. Am I right or what? So we are going to take these 4 panels and we are going to have a little bit of a mix and match, and we are going to kind of chop and add some instant dimension foam tape, which if you're sending the cards, you might want to skip. But if you're hand delivering these, go to town. Honestly, go to town. It's gonna look fabulous. And then we are going to top these with some die cut word sentiments. So these ones are gorgeous, first of all, but they are from the Timeless Sentiment 3 set. So we got Shine Bright, Peace and Joy, Believe, and All is Calm. So for one, it's going to say Shine Bright. Oops, there we go. And there is a little dot for that as well. We also have Peace and Joy. This might go, so this one is done out of citrine glitter cardstock. This one is the brushed gold metallic cardstock, which is my favorite. I am obsessed with it. Yes, but on this one here we might go Peace and Joy. Now there are also like shadow pieces here, so we'll see if that kind of makes them stand out a little bit more. And then also you can always like prop these up a lot easier than if you're just using the words themselves. So we're gonna have a little play around and see what we can create. But there's going to be there's going to be a little bit of embellishments. We're going to use some fun things to kind of just make these sparkle up, and I think we're actually going to take this one away. Yeah, but I just wanted to show you what it would look like if you're using the Better Press system to like letterpress with ink. And I do think that this would look absolutely fabulous with the gold pigment ink, but seeing as I don't have it, oh poor me, oh, maybe I'll need to ask Santa for that. Then we are going to go with these 3 cards or backgrounds now. So there is also potentially using one of these wax seals that is left over from my previous video, which was just a few days ago, where I've actually gone for a very pink color scheme. But I made this as well, and it just kind of, you know, makes sense to use it. So we shall see what happens here. But the key thing is essentially we're going to do some very, very easy, mass-produce friendly designs and things that you can, you know, prepare all your bits and pieces together. So if you're planning on, say you just want to go for this super simple, very classic, elegant as well, if I may say so myself, then I would suggest you cut out all of your word pieces, all of your shadow pieces, glue them all together. So die cut everything first, glue everything first, get your Better Press or your die cutting machine, make sure you check the folder or the instructions. So I have the Spellbinders Platinum one. So to do a or to use a press plate as a embossing plate, essentially, you use platform A and platform B, which is this one, and then you put your paper and the actual plate on, and then you use the soft embossing mat, which is this kind of tan colored one, and then the blue adapter plate here. So that is something to bear in mind. Make sure you check your die cutting machine so you don't break anything. But then, so that is essentially like all of the kind of top tips when it comes to mass producing a card. So it's, now that we got that all out of the way, let's get on with it. Right, so I wanted to show you a technique that doesn't require any tools whatsoever. It just requires your hands and maybe a little bit of patience. Now, you're going to need some paper, but don't go for like your really thick cardstock, the one that you usually make card bases from. Make sure that you go for something quite thin. So this is like printer paper. And then all we're going to do is we're going to roll this up. We're going to like literally scrunch it up like that. And then we're going to unfold and we're going to scrunch it again. And you're probably thinking, this girl is crazy, but just bear with me. Just bear with me. Okay, so we're gonna scrunch, and like really just get it in there, like maybe mush it a little bit as well. And then what we're gonna do, and I know this is not gonna look very pretty right now, but we're gonna take this, and oh, this bit here is pretty nice, isn't it? But we're gonna scrunch up a little bit more because we're gonna like look at all the details here now. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna trim this down. There we go. Okay, so it's not going to be exactly 5.5 because it is, you know, scrunched down, but we're going to try to kind of trim it so that it is roughly 5.5 by 4.25 inch. Okay, and then this is going to be our background. Now, what you can do here is if you want a little something like a little bit of like color or, you know, just shimmer, either use some gold splatters on there. You can take an pigment ink pad. That's a little bit of a tongue twister there. And you just very, very gently kind of rub it on top, or just kind of like dab a little bit. Or if you want to leave it just white, just leave it like that. And then the idea is we're going to take this, and it's going to be kind of like our snowy background. And then to make sure that we have something that will actually support our sentiment, we are going to take a little piece of paper. This is actually a 4.25 and 5.5 inch piece of paper. So we're going to chop this at an angle. So we don't want too big, but we should probably decide which one we're going to use first. So maybe we'll do a believe, because it's not going to take up too much space here. So we're going to trim this down like this. And on the back of this, we're going to add a little bit of instant dimension foam tape, because layers is life. And then we're going to pop this onto there, and then we're going to glue this down. But what we're going to do is we're going to take some double-sided tape, like the ultra sticky double-sided tape. We're going to put some up here. We're not going to push down all of the edges, so you're going to get this glorious kind of like texture and very like tactile card. And then on top of this, we're going to have our believe. But I'm wondering if we splatter a little bit of gold on this one, just to bring in a little bit of the glamour. And you know what? I'm going to do that right now, because this is going to look fab. But I am wondering... No. So I'm just going to splatter a little bit of gold on this, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so here is our little piece with some glorious splatter on them. So on the back of this piece, as I said, we're going to add some instant dimension foam tape, and on the back of this one, we are going to just add a bit of the ultra sticky tape here. Okay. So this is a super, super simple idea, which you can get the kids involved in. If you have, you know, even if you have older kids, you know, they might be up for like scrunching some paper and tossing them your way. And then they can say, oh, we've been part of the card making process. But this is something that is just so simple, yet can be so fun. There we go. Okay, so it kind of looks like a snow hill, doesn't it? Yeah. So on the back of this, we're just going to make sure that this is dry. I think so. And we're going to add some instant dimension foam tape. And I just need to find the beginning. There we go. And then we might add some bling to this as well, just because we can. Kind of like drifting snow. That would be cool, wouldn't it? There I go again, tooting my own horn when I have these little ideas. But, you know, when would I ever say no to sparkles and gems? Especially when it comes to like the holidays, you know? Okay. So there we go. Now, I think it's going to look really nice if we add a little bit of Instant Dimension foam tape to the back of this as well, just to give it a little bit of a, like, up. So we're going to need to be a little bit careful here because it is just a tiny bit sort of too big. So we can't just do like one continuous strip, but one little snip here and then we are done. So although could that be? No, we're gonna add this here. So we're gonna try to get this on reasonably straight, because even though, you know, we're making handmade cards, we're not doing Hallmark, it's not gonna be perfect. We still want it to be somewhat straight, don't we? Now, I feel like we could do the clear iridescent ones on this, just to kind of make it look like it's snowing. So we're going to go quite a lot to these, I think, because, you know, it very rarely snows like 2 or 3 little snowflakes, does it? So I am going to speed this up, because otherwise we'll be here all day, because I do tend to over embellish a little bit. Right, so here is our finished card, and yeah, maybe it is a little bit, you know, a smidged over bling, but hey, here we go. Okay, so next step, let's use this fabulous background. Now, we can either do something super simple. We're just gonna go bang right in the middle, shine bright, that is the card. We could do this, but I don't think we're going to. So, can we do a 2 for 1? Yes, we can. So, we're going to take this, we are going to chop it, and we are going to try to do kind of very evenly. So we have 2 panels, or 2 parts, and each one of these are obviously going to go onto a card base. So we got one here, and just for sort of, we could do like 2 different ones. So we go shine bright here, and then peace and joy. So very simple, super simple actually. And we're going to do one flat, just so that you see, you know, I can do things without Instant Dimension foam tape. I sometimes feel like I have to kind of prove that, because I do use it almost excessively, because it is such fabulous stuff. Now, because of the texture, you are probably going to have to add a little bit more glue than you might normally, because you're going to have to help the raised parts that are going to face the card. They obviously need to have the glue on there so that they can actually stick to the card base. So there is quite a lot of glue here in the corner. I'm going to try to stretch that out a little bit. And then I'm going to try to make sure that I get an even cover here. And then we're going to very gently set this down. Now, the plus side of having liquid glue is obviously that you can get this straight. So if you realize now all of a sudden, oh, it's not straight, you do have a few extra seconds where you can, you know, shift things around a little bit and save your project. So we're going to glue down our sentiment very flat as well. So here we're just going to pop this down, and I might surprise everyone, including myself, and step away. Oh, I know. Oh my gosh. Okay. You know what? I'm just going to put this one away. No, we're going to have a quick little look. And look at that gorgeous, gorgeous texture there. Whew. Okay, now with this one, oh no, we are not going to go flat. No, 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 no. No, we're not. So we're going to grab our instant dimension foam tape again. Yes, we are. And we're going to add some here onto our pieces. So obviously we want it to be quite steady, because there's nothing kind of sadder than a sagging card, you know, when you're taking all of that time to, you know, make a beautiful design, and then all of a sudden the bits and pieces just kind of like fold in on themselves. So we are not going to have that happen today. No siree. So here we go. Okay, and then we need a little bit more right there. So all right, okay, now we might as well stick this a little bit down as well. Waste not, want not, right? So here we are now getting 2 cards out of 1 panel. So this is also like, if you are mass producing and you're in a hurry, you need to get cards out, this is a great way of doing it. And it just adds a little bit of like a fun little like look to your cards as well. But also, if you're in a hurry, I would suggest skipping the instant dimension foam tape, because it does add a little bit of time to your projects. So if you are in a hurry, just maybe skip the foam tape and just go straight for flat cards, because also if you're mailing them, you know, you don't want anything to get stuck and ruined whilst they're going through those mailing machines. So with this one, we are going to have to puzzle a little bit more because of the way that the die cut is like set up. So I think here we can probably just about make it. I'm going to take this little piece here. Like on the back of this, it looks horrendous. So it looks really bad, but nobody will see this. So it doesn't matter that it looks crazy on the back. Just keep on going. Okay, so we have a little bit left over. So I'm going to pop these onto the backing, and they will do really well for another word that I cut, which I'm surely going to do. So here we go. Now you will probably notice on this card that it is a little bit wonky, but we're going to embrace it because, like I said, we are not doing Hallmark cards. We are doing handmade cards. Yes. So here we can probably trim off this bit here a little bit just to kind of give it a little bit of a straighter edge. But on the other side of the card, there's going to be a tiny bit of a gap there. But you know what? People are hopefully going to be so mesmerized by the shine that they're going to think, wow, that's gorgeous. But you know what? We might rein it in at 3. What do you think? So here's one. Here's our second. So this is our 2 for 1s. And here's our super simple, you know, do-it-yourself texture card. Are we gonna leave it at that? Yes, we are. Okay. Wow, I can't believe how much white space there is on these cards, because I am normally so bad with white space, but I think the texture and a little bit of that sparkle really makes a difference. So hopefully you will have enjoyed this video. It's a little bit of a crazy roller coaster ride. However, hopefully you have taken something from this video that has made you feel very inspired to get those cards done, like die cut, prepped, assembled, written, sealed, and delivered. And with that, I'm all done for today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Do let me know what you thought about this one down in the comments below, and I will see you very soon again. Bye for now.
The beauty of Altenew project kits is you get a bunch of supplies perfectly coordinated to each other, and this makes it a breeze to make cards in bulk. Check out Carissa's tutorial here to learn more.
Stick around as I inspire you with multicolored stamping and 3 card projects featuring 1 kit and 1 color palette. Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for Altenew. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing how to create 3 cards with 1 kit and 1 color palette. That's all you need. And today I'm using the Craft Your Life Floral Odyssey kit. I love this big, bold stamp set that's included in the kit. It has some fabulous sentiments as well. Some that are a little different than you may have seen in the past. They're kind of direction and journey oriented, which really ties in to the stencil set as well as the die set that's included in this kit. Now the stencil set includes 2 sets of stencils, one which makes a kind of floral border and the other which coordinates with this really cool kind of city map overview type situation. And then finally, we have the included die set, which cuts the center out of that floral frame. And you have a couple of compass type images in this die set as well, which are perfect for masculine cards. Now I'll be using the same color palette for all 3 of my cards and this beautiful stamp set. And I'm starting out by mounting several of the stamps in my Stamp Wheel 2.0, and I am going to create a ton of stamped images at once. We're gonna do some multicolor stamping, which is much easier than you may think. And we're gonna create a bunch of images and then take those images and lay them out in a few different card designs. Now, when I lay these out, I'm purposely separating my florals from the greenery because I'm going to want to ink those up in different colorways. And so by separating them just slightly, by keeping all the greenery at the top and all the florals at the bottom, I can easily ink these up in a couple of different colors. So I'm starting out by inking up my greenery in Sweet Leaf, and then the florals at the bottom I am going to ink up in Pink Pearl. Now I'm inking over the entire surface of the florals at this time, and we're going to go in and add a second color here in just a moment. I'll flip my flip plate over and stamp all those images, and then I am going to go in and re-ink these images again using the same colors, so Sweet Leaf at the top and Pink Pearl at the bottom. Clearly, I have sped this up just a bit because I did spend a little bit of time creating all of my images. That's where a big bulk of the creation time came in, but I even had leftovers when I was done with these 3 cards. Now to add some shading on the edges of these florals, I'm taking my Coral Bliss ink and a mini ink blending brush, and I'm dabbing some of the Coral Bliss ink onto the edge of the florals using the blending brush. Now the blending brush is your friend because you could go in with kind of a rock and roll technique where you're just inking the edges of the stamps with the ink pad itself, but you tend to end up with a little bit harsher lines. So I went ahead and repeated that process twice, and then I have my first set of florals and greenery completed. So the beauty of the Stamp Wheel 2.0 is I can leave all of these images in place, switch out my paper, and then re-ink in different colors, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm inking up the greenery in Just Green and the florals in Rouge. Now these are really like solid images. So I find that inking and stamping a couple of times gets me the best results. You do, when you're working with a newer stamp set, want to make sure that you're conditioning those, and you can use the conditioning eraser from Altenew to help with that process. Now I'm kind of quickly wiping up my floral stamps so that I can add my secondary color on these. Keep in mind the base is Rouge, and so now I'm using Chamomile, which is a warm yellow, to ink the edges of my florals. And I have to tell you that of all of them, I like this color combo, but it was probably my least favorite of the 3 that I used here. So once I've done that, I'm going to go in again with a second layer in certain areas on these florals and add a little more chamomile. Now for my third set of florals, I'm inking up the florals in chamomile and the greenery in Misty Morning. Now I know that this may be an unexpected color for that greenery, but I really love this Misty Morning color in both the cardstock and the ink, and I think it is so fresh for summer. Again, I'm repeating that process with chamomile on those florals. I'm going to get a good coverage of those. And once I'm happy with that, I'll bring in Coral Bliss and start inking the edges of these floral stamps using my mini ink blending brush again. Now, you'll notice that on the smaller florals at the top, I'm not being careful to ink like the entire edge. I'm just kind of going in here and there. And I'm not making sure that I'm re-inking the exact same areas on each of these florals. I'm just working to build the color. Now I have the Floral Odyssey die add-on set. This is not included in the kit, but it is available as an add-on, and it includes all the outline dies for the florals as well as the sentiments, and I think it really does expand this kit in a new way. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to die cut all of the images that I've just stamped. I'm lining up the coordinating dies, running that through my die cut machine, and I am going to end up with a ton of images that I can then easily lay out into layouts and create. I love the color palette that I've chosen today. It's very fresh and summery, and it's inspired by a recent project that I created for my own personal YouTube channel where I just picked out a summer color palette and started creating. So here's a look at all of those images. So beautiful. The colors look so wonderful together, and it's perfect for summer. Now for all of my layouts, I'm kind of creating like these corner swags or these cornered elements. I'm starting out with a lower left-hand corner, and you're gonna see me mix up the greenery colors that I'm using. I'm mixing the florals with different colors of florals, making sure that I kind of spread my color out throughout the arrangement. So you'll see some yellow at the top, some yellow at the bottom, kind of bringing that all together and mixing up. I just really want to have good color distribution. Now, once I have all of these individual elements laid out, I'm going to take some satin masking tape. I'm going to deactivate it slightly by placing it onto my skin before I place it over my stamped images. Keep in mind that if your ink is not completely dry and you're putting an adhesive tape, even if it's a low tack tape, over these images, you can definitely rip the paper as you're removing that low tack tape like the satin masking tape. So you want to make sure these images are good and dry. And yes, dye ink still does need a little bit of time to dry. And you want to make sure that you kind of deactivate it slightly. Now you'll see me flip this entire image over, add some foam adhesive to the back and a little bit of liquid glue to connect all of these pieces. And now I have a single piece that I can move and kind of experiment with. I went back and forth on whether to put this on the Misty Morning cardstock or to put it on white cardstock. I ended up with white, just a fresh color palette for summer and something super bright. It feels slightly more spring or winter if you put it on that Misty Morning because it's got a lot of coolness. Now I did take a sentiment from that Floral Odyssey stamp set and stamped it onto a strip of Misty Morning cardstock using the Cloudy Sky ink. And the Cloudy Sky is just one step darker than the Misty Morning. So now I have my elements ready to go, ready to place on my card. And I have removed the foam adhesive backer and placed it onto an A2 size card front. And now I'm adding my sentiment strip with a little bit of foam. But we all know that this is a touch of sparkle, and so we need that little bit of sparkle. And in order to do that, I'm just bringing in the clear iridescent stellar sequins. I'm using some liquid glue and my Perfect Picker tool to just sprinkle those throughout my design and add them in as some floral centers as well. And I think this is absolutely beautiful. The dimension makes all the difference on this card because it is so simple, but that little bit of added dimension with the Instant Dimension foam tape really makes this card stand out. Now I want to create another element that kind of floats in the center of the card. So I'm starting out with a scrap piece of white cardstock that's fitted down right into the center of this card. And I'm going to start placing elements onto this cardstock using some sticky tape, but I don't want them to adhere permanently. So I'm just temporarily tacking them down with just a little bit of this tape because eventually we're going to trim these down to fit that little panel of cardstock completely. And we're going to create kind of this floating die cut element in the center of the card. Once I have all of those placed temporarily onto the cardstock, I am going to add that satin masking tape. I'm just reusing the tape that I used before. And once I have that position, I'm going to take this panel, flip it over, and trim all of the excess of those die cuts that's hanging off of this panel of cardstock. This is going to give me a really clean element that will eventually, even though they're singular die cuts right now, that will eventually become one element. Once I have those trimmed down, I'm going to carefully remove all of the die cuts from that panel. And there's one that kind of stuck behind, but it's okay. We're going to add that on separately in just a bit. And I'm going to add foam adhesive on the back of all of these. I like to add the foam adhesive kind of overlapping multiple elements so that it keeps those elements tied together. It's like creating a bridge from one die cut to the other. So I use lots of small pieces of foam adhesive to do this, but again, the dimension on this card, because it is so clean and simple, is what's going to make all the difference in the world. Once those are all connected, then I can flip this back over and remove that satin masking tape. That little corner piece just was wanting to be a problem, but that's okay. We can sneak that in easily enough. And you can see I am carefully removing the satin masking tape. I don't want to rip anything. Now I have this beautiful clean-edged design, but it's created with die cuts. Yes, you could stamp this, but I think it's so much more fun to do this in a dimensional way with the individual die cuts. I've removed all the backer from the foam adhesive, placed that in the center of an A2 size card, and then I popped up another floral right in the center of that with extra foam adhesive. I stamped a sentiment from that Floral Odyssey stamp set onto a strip of Misty Morning cardstock, and I'm positioning it right over the top of that element that we've created in the center of the card. I'm using, again, some foam adhesive to add a little dimension to this. And once I get that placed, I'm going to take my scissors and trim that down to where it stays within the confines of that matte area that we created on the card. Of course, we needed a little bit of sparkle, so I added some more of those clear iridescent stellar sequins to finish off this card project, and I think this is such a fun way to use individual die cuts. You can see that bit of dimension, which just really makes this come alive, and you can see the areas between the die cuts that are kind of, I don't know, see-through to the base of the card, which I think is a lot of fun. Now for my third and final card, I'm going to do this in a different way. I'm arranging my elements and then picking them up one piece at a time and kind of positioning them onto my card base. All of the greenery pieces on this card will be added with some liquid glue or some tape runner adhesive, and the floral elements will be added with some instant dimension foam tape, so it has varying levels of dimension. I'm working my way through, placing all of those images, and then trimming off the excess that's hanging over the edge of my card base. Now I decided it needed a little more yellow in this lower corner, so I'm adding it temporarily again with some sticky tape adhesive, and then I'm going to pull that up and add some foam adhesive on the back and then place it permanently onto my card front. Now for the sentiment, again, I'm using that Floral Odyssey stamp set because I wanted to stick within the kit. And I've got this beautiful sentiment. I'm using my stamp wheel to stamp it directly onto my card front. These cards all have just a single layer of the card base and then the die cuts on top. So not technically one layer, but pretty one layer when it comes to Carissa Wiley cards. I've inked that up in Cloudy Sky ink and stamped that onto my card front. Added some more of those clear iridescent sequins to draw the eye and add a touch of sparkle, and that finishes off my third card, all created using the Floral Odyssey Craft Your Life kit. And I didn't really even touch the die set that's included with this kit or the embossing folder or the stencil set. I was just really having fun with some stamping techniques today. When you grab a kit like this and you pick a color palette, you really can get a lot of mileage, a lot of projects out of your crafting time because you're not switching between multiple color palettes or multiple products. And I really find this a great way to save time when I'm crafting. And now I have 3 beautiful card projects to add to my stash. Now, as always, I will have links to the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there, or you can head on over to the coordinating blog post. I'll have that linked in the YouTube description below as well. Over there, you're going to find more information, more still shots, and a complete list of supplies. As always, I want to say thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed joining me on this crafty session and creating 3 cards with 1 kit and 1 color palette. I hope I've inspired you to try some multicolored stamping the next time that you are grabbing your supplies and getting crafty. If you've enjoyed these projects and you've enjoyed this video, I would love for you to give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any of the paper crafting and card making video tutorials shared here. Thanks again for joining me today. I'm Carissa Wiley here for Altenew, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.
Any Build a Garden fans out there? You'll no doubt love this tutorial by Eram that teaches you how to use one set to make 3 stunning cards that have their own vibe and colour palette.
Today I'll be sharing 3 different looks using the same stamp. So let's get started. I will use the Build a Garden Rose Reverie stamp set, and I have already cut out an A2 sized panel out of the 5x7 hot press watercolor cardstock. I will stamp the image in Obsidian pigment ink, and because I will heat emboss the image, I will first prep the panel with anti-static powder and then stamp it with Obsidian pigment ink. Next, I will cover it with crystal clear embossing powder and heat set it. Heat embossing the image makes the watercolor process slightly easier as the water and pigment are easy to control. I will use the watercolor brush markers to color the image, starting with Ruby Red for the flower from the Winter Wonderland set. I will use the brush directly and apply this to where I want to show depth or shadows. You can also add some pigment onto the watercolor palette. Right now I am applying this to the end of the petal where it connects to the flower center, which is what I do most of the time. You can work on one petal at a time or add pigment to several, your choice. I will just show you a few petals since it's so easy to do. I will now use one brush to activate the pigment and pull it out towards the petal tips. This is a number 1 size brush, and once I'm midway, I will use another clean brush, size 4, and spread the pigment, which will be much softer as now the brush will have water and no pigment. Repeat this with all the petals. This will give the petal tips a soft look. You can also pick up pigment using a tissue if you think there is too much water, or a bit of variation will help. It's super easy watercoloring and the heat embossing will help. Once the flowers are colored, I will apply color to the leaves similarly but step it up by bringing in another color. I will first apply a very small amount of tree bark watercolor just to the base of the leaves and then activate it with yellow ochre watercolor, leaving a bit of space at the tips of the leaves. Then I will use the water for blending. Don't worry too much about how this looks. The dark and the light colors will make this work. I will dry the panel slightly once the image is colored. To add color to the background, start by first adding an outline along the edge of the image. I'm using tree bark watercolor for this. And then drag the brush at an angle in one direction. I'm dragging the brush towards the edge. This can be downwards or upwards, depending on where I am adding color. Once I've added this sort of dry brush texture to the panel, I will use the number 4 fine watercolor brush and activate the pigment by swiping the brush vertically in one direction, only once or at most twice, so I don't lose the texture from dry brushing. My brush has a bit of water in it, so that I don't need to go back in twice to get water. I just have to swipe once. Next, you can use the heat tool to dry the panel and mask off the image using the stamp, and add titanium white gouache to add more texture using the number 4 fine watercolor brush. This is optional. If you like, you can even add black splatters. This will add more texture and drama to the background. To add bling, use Sicilian amber gem sparkles and then stamp a sentiment and pop it up. Now I will stamp the image twice on Classic Crest Solar White, once in Obsidian pigment ink and once in Permanent Mist gray ink. I will show you the inking process once only, but I will be inking both images in the same manner. Obviously, both of these will look different once inked, since the second image will give a no-line look. Keeping the same color palette, I will start by adding Coral Berry Fresh Dye ink from the base of the petal with a heavy hand, concentrating it heavily on this area and reducing the pressure significantly as I move to the petal tip, so there is little to no ink on the tips. Next, I will add Ruby Red Fresh Dye ink just to the base using a detailed blending brush. This will replicate the look of the first card panel. If you prefer a darker ink, darker than Ruby Red, you can use it for the petals in the center. That is your preference. For the leaves, I will use Yellow Ochre and Rhodolite Fresh Dye inks. First, I will apply Yellow Ochre Fresh Dye ink, softening it when I reach the tip of the leaves. Next, I will use Rhodolite Fresh Dye ink and apply it to the base of the leaves, adding depth and dimension. I will also do this for the next layer of the stencil. It is super easy to ink. I'm trying to replicate the same effect I achieved with watercolor, but using stencils and ink. So if watercolor isn't your thing, we have simple coloring stencils with this builder garden to make your life easy. And cut to the no-line coloring result. Doesn't it look beautiful? It's so good, right? Just have to stamp in the permanent mist gray ink. I die cut both images using the coordinating die. For my second card, I will use panel of Sicilian Amber cardstock and emboss it with the Wanderlust 3D embossing folder. But before doing that, I'll apply Yellow Ochre Fresh Dye ink around the entire edge. Now I will run this through the die cutting machine with the Wanderlust 3D embossing folder. Next, I will use the Rhodolite Fresh Dye ink and gently apply this all around the edge, softly bringing it inwards. You can use a small blending brush if you have a heavy hand when it comes to ink blending, or you don't have good control. Once finished, use antique gold pigment ink and gently swipe the ink pad across the panel. If you'd like to add more of the gold ink, you can also apply it to the edges. Then decide how you'd like to place the image. I will be positioning it off the edge and then filling in leftover space wherever it fits. Before adhering the image, I added black splatters with carbon black gouache and heat embossed a sentiment in antique gold and jet black cardstock, then adhered a strip of citrine glitter cardstock. I also added a few champagne sequins. For the no-line image card, I wanted to create a look that is off the edge. So I cut a 2.75 by 5.5 piece of cardstock to adhere the image on. I added score lines to the panel that I will adhere to the card base. This will show on the left side of the image. I will adhere a strip of dazzling diamond glitter cardstock under the panel where the image will go on, and then adhere this to the card front. I stamped the sentiment in Yellow Ochre Fresh Dye ink because I wanted to keep the softness of this card. I hope you like the cards. Don't forget to leave a comment and hop with us. Please let us know which product you like best in this release. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.
JC proves you don't need a ton of supplies to make unique projects. Check out his tutorial here featuring a beautiful rose image to create 3 projects.
I'm going to grab the Altenew embossing paste. I haven't used this medium in a long time, and I thought new items from the August 2025 release were going to be perfect to showcase some techniques I wanted to try actually with the Altenew embossing paste. And bring in the Build a Garden Rose Reverie set. So this set contains the stamp, stencil, and the die. And as you search through your stash to try to recreate this card, what I'm looking for is an outline stamp with large open petal areas. And more importantly, a stencil that also fills in those large open petal areas. So you'll see on the layering guide found on the back and inside of the packaging that the layers for each petal fills in the images on the inside in a solid form. So there isn't really a detail layer. These stencils are made to create beautiful ombre or beautiful gradients on each of the petals so that you have a little bit more control on where to place color within the image. While the die is not necessary, fortunately this Build-A-Garden does come with it. I am going to use this in my card example, as I think it'll deliver stunning results today. The first thing I'm going to do is bring in a few panels of heavyweight white cardstock. So I'm going to use the embossing paste and also stamp my outline onto these panels. But first I'm going to bring in the Rose Reverie die. Just cut out this shape from 3 panels of white cardstock. I am cutting more than I probably need. In the end, I'm hoping that this will save me some time by cutting some extra pieces. So here are 2 positive pieces, and I've also kept the negative space and the positive piece for one of the images. If you're recreating this at home, I just recommend that you keep one of your negative spaces for now. And then in my Altenew stamp wheel, I'm going to center the negative space from around the die cut, and then inlay one of my positive pieces, making sure that both pieces make contact with my slim grit mat. Then I will position and center the stamp into my die cut shape and pick up the stamp with my flip plate. I'm going to keep things easy by stamping with the Altenew Obsidian pigment ink, and I'll end up with a gorgeous fine outline on my die cut. I'll leave the negative piece on my stamp wheel and gently pry off and remove my positive piece. I'll repeat this stamping process on my next 2 positive pieces, again with Obsidian pigment ink. Once I've stamped my final image, I can remove it from my stamp wheel. And just in case, I'll keep this in my 6.5 by 8.5 storage pocket, along with other items in this Build-A-Garden bundle. I'll put away my stamp wheel for now, and bring in my 9 by 12 sticky mat grid. These stamped outlines have had a little bit of time to dry, so I will put them on top of my sticky mat grid. And before I do anything with the petals on these images, I'm going to work on the leaves first. I'm bringing in the Rose Reverie Build-A-Garden stencil set. And again, these images and layers on the stencil set are more of an open type, so that you can create beautiful smooth gradients on each of the petals and the leaves as well. After referring to the layering guide found on the stencil packaging, the leaf layers are on stencil layers number 4 and number 5. Just be careful that we're going to omit the petal layers for now. And I'll just start with this bottom left cluster of roses and solely focus on the leaves like I mentioned. So these images right here, these 3 open images. And right now in the heat of summer, my rose leaves are kind of turning a bluish green. So I'm feeling kind of inspired by that today. And I'm applying a layer of Aqualicious first to the base of the leaves, leaving a little highlight at the end. Then I'll jump down to Galactic Stream to deepen the base of the leaves and create some interesting shadows, just like that. And I'll repeat this on a second image, just like so. After quickly cleaning off my stencil, I'm going to apply a different palette of greens to this last Rose Reverie cluster. For this one, I will use Misty Sage and Green Opal, starting with a base fill of Misty Sage on the entire leaf. Again, I'm still working on stencil number 4, and then jumping down to Green Opal to fill in the base of the leaf. And this entire time I have been using the mini ink blending tools to fill in these gradients. Now that I'm done with stencil layer number 4, I'll move on to stencil layer number 5, and this will fill in the remainder of the leaf images in this set. Again, I'm not going to color in these petal layers on the center of the rose yet, and everything else in the stencil is intended for the leaves. So I applied a base layer of Misty Sage, then I will move on to Green Opal. Then I'll quickly clean off my stencil and repeat the layering colors with Aqualicious and Galactic Stream on the other 2 roses in this set. And after I've finished filling in all of my leaf layers. I'll let this dry back a little bit, and then I'll return to start working on the petal images on all 3 of these die cut shapes. So now from the Rose Reverie Build a Garden stencil set, I'm going to start filling in the rose petals on these images. So I'll start with stencil layer number 1 and align the openings of the stencil to their respective layers on the rose image. And now this is where I'll start using the Altenew embossing paste. So in addition to the embossing paste, I also need my Altenew mixed media palette knife set, and I'll be using the smallest knife in here, which is the number 2 palette knife. And working one petal at a time, I'm not necessarily swiping this embossing paste to completely fill in the layer. What I'm doing is creating a taller edge towards the outside of the petal. Then with a brush, I'm using the number 18 watercolor brush with the flat bristles and a paper towel. Once I feel I have applied enough of the embossing paste to the edge of the petal, then I'll soften that gradient and push that embossing paste towards the center of the flower and wipe off the excess. So I'm applying a little bit of embossing paste and brushing that almost like we're painting with texture here. And you don't want to apply too heavy of layers because then this will take too long to dry. So you'll see it's almost not a complete fill. So I'm trying to get the texture of the bristles of my watercolor brush to fill in the petal layers of this rose. And once I've applied embossing paste to all the open layers, when I reveal the stencil, you'll see that we're going to get a slightly different texture from the embossing paste to give that really velvety feel to all of our petals. Let me see if I can tip this a little bit and you can see some of that brush stroke texture that we're getting on each of the petals. Since I have the number 1 stencil out, I'll fill in the remainder of the petal layers with the embossing paste. So again, I don't need a lot, and I'm applying a little bit just to the very edge or outside edge of each of the petal images. And once you get used to the motion of applying embossing paste to each of the petals, then you can do multiples at a time. So once I've applied the embossing paste, I can use my dry brush and move the embossing paste towards the center of the rose, creating some brush stroke movements in the embossing paste. And I am trying to do this quickly before it dries. And since these layers are fairly thin, I anticipate that this won't take too long to dry on my project. Just like that. And again, I'll tilt this a little bit so that you can see the little bit of texture that we're getting from the embossing paste. Then I will repeat this on my last image down here. Once I'm happy with the result of this last image, I'll peel off the stencil and I'll quickly show you what this looks like. So there's a little bit of directional texture, especially on this petal. You can really tell the sort of waviness that happens in the petal. And I'll let this layer dry for, I don't know, anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. But for now, I'm going to clean off stencil layer number 1 and my little using soap and water, and then I'll come back to fill in the second layer to all of these petals in the same fashion. Actually, let these pieces dry overnight, and let me lift one of them up so that you can see the texture that we're going to get. I love that the embossing paste has retained the brushed texture on each of the petals. So hopefully there's this nice tactile texture that your card recipient can touch when they receive this card. But anyway, for now, I'm going to put this back on my Altenew Sticky Mat grid. And then working in numerical order, I have stencil layer number 2 now. And again, I'm going to align the opening of the stencil to each of the petal images, just like this. And for these layers that are more towards the center of the flower where it's not so obvious to put embossing paste, it might help to reference the guide that's in the product trifold to see where the white highlights are on the example provided in the image. And essentially wherever you see this white highlight found in the product trifold is where you will want to apply embossing paste, or it's merely a guideline of where I would put it. I'll use my number 2 palette knife again and apply a little bit of this paste again to where I think the white highlights will go on these rose petals. And then with that number 18 watercolor brush again, I'm going to add little brush strokes to the embossing paste and also help to move the embossing paste onto the petals. Aside from the texture that I'm adding with the watercolor brush, the dry watercolor brush, for the most part this is a fairly thin wash of this embossing paste. You'll see the sort of crepe paper feeling that we're getting on each of the petals as I remove these stencils and build their layers. And that is the effect that we're looking for with the embossing paste on all of these images. And again, I am doing this on 3 stamped images. You can certainly do this on just 1 image, but I'm compensating for any mistakes that I might make along the way. And in the end, if I have too many, then I'll be able to make more cards. So I don't see any harm in this. And since I'm waiting for all of these layers to dry anyway, I might as well be prepared to make more cards while I'm setting aside the time to dry. You know what I mean? So I'll keep applying a light layer of the embossing paste with my palette knife, move the embossing paste with my dry watercolor brush, create some directional strokes, and sort of paint the embossing paste onto my stencil. And then again, once I'm happy with the texture, I'll move on to the next image. Here's the second stencil on my 3rd image, but for now, again, I will let this dry back for about 30 minutes to an hour. I'm not waiting for everything to be fully dry. I just want to be able to overlay the next layered stencil on top without compromising the fine texture that you're finding on all of the petals. So I'll be back in a bit. I feel like my previous layer from stencil number 2 can support the weight of the stencil as well as the pressure from the palette knives and such. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to stencil layer number 3 and gently overlay the image as per usual. I applied a layer of embossing paste. Then I will brush and create some interesting texture on the petals. And as we get into the higher number stencils, the details become more fine. So as you become more comfortable with applying the stenciled images to your outlines, this should work up pretty quickly and your time between applying layers should become shorter. And here's the result of the final image using stencil layer number 3. See, we're getting excellent texture now and a lot of height on the petals. Here's stencil layer number 4. Remember that stencil layers number 4 and 5 have the open leaf images, so just make sure that you're not embossing over those. And here's the effect on stencil layer number 4. And then we've got one more to go. And you'll notice I'm getting a lot of excellent texture and a lot of direction in the embossing paste. So this is definitely going to take center stage on your card front once it's all complete. I'm going to begin working one image at a time. The embossing paste on this is now completely dry, and I can tell by the back that there isn't any moisture anymore in the embossing paste. It's really important that the embossing paste on your cardstock is completely dry, because we will be working now with Altenew's fresh dye inks on top of the embossing paste to add some fabulous color and really complete the color palette on this rose. So I'm bringing back my stencils again in numerical order, so this is stencil layer number 1. And onto the open petal layers, I want to start ink blending. So I'm going to start with Citrus Burst and my mini ink blending tools again, and I will add this color through the stencil directly on top of the embossing paste, painting little gradients on each of the petals. I'm starting from the base of the petal, blending this ink out towards the tip. So that's Citrus Burst. I'll move down to Mandarin Burst and another mini ink blending tool, and I'm applying a shallower gradient of this on the petal and letting the bristles capture the high points of the embossing paste. Then lastly, I'll grab red jasper and apply an even shallower gradient of this ink. So let's reveal that. Then I'll keep working my way down in numerical order of the stencils, filling in these petal layers in that same gradient. So citrus burst, then mandarin burst, then red jasper. And if I make any errors in my coloring as I'm doing this, fortunately I have two other backups. I only used citrus burst and mandarin burst on this final layer, stencil layer number 5. I omitted the leaf layers on this. So now, as I lift this up and show you the texture on here, you'll see that the ink captured the high points of the embossing paste, giving some realistic and interesting tactile texture to this rose now. So it's almost like you can experience touching a real-life rose with their nice velvety petals and that marshmallow type bounciness when you squeeze a bud that's about to open. That's sort of what this reminds me of. So I'm happy with the results of this. I have 2 more embossed images that I can work with, so I'm going to experiment a little bit with the color palettes on those, and then I'll show you the end results of that. Again, here's that first iteration and color palette that I used to create this yellow-orange blend on each of the petals. Then I wanted a blush rose color palette. I used rose quartz and purple wine to get this dreamy mauve blend. And then on this last version, I only used pink sand to create a dreamy white gradient on this version here. I feel like adding one last detail to the leaves of this rose. So I'm going to take out the Altenew fine liner pen set and use the 01 weight pen to add additional vein details to the leaves of my rose cluster. I feel like these fine lines are going to help complement the fine lines from the brushed texture on the embossing, and I feel like this will help give the leaves a little bit more direction and flow as well. I'm creating little curved strokes to add in to each of the leaves, just like that. So I'm really excited to see how this turns out in the end. I'm going to play with a different orientation of this cluster. So I'm going to repeat adding the fine line details to my remaining 2 Rose Reverie clusters. I'll reveal all of my cards to you in just a second. And here's the end result of the orange and teal leaved rose cluster. I used a background cardstock of dark chocolate and also outlined the outside of the Rose Reverie cluster using the same Altenew artist marker. Here's the end result of the rose-petaled colored Rose Reverie cluster. I used Morning Frost cardstock and also its Altenew artist marker equivalent to finish off this simple sympathy card. And then finally, I did not make any modifications to the Rose Reverie cluster on this one. I used the Sand Dunes cardstock and its coordinating Altenew artist marker to let these white blooms really shine through on this cardstock panel. On all of these, I used the Essential Black and White enamel dots to add little flowy embellishments throughout the bouquet. And that finishes my take on using embossing paste with a watercolor brush to give interesting texture to my Build-A-Garden Rose Reverie image. As always, I have all of the materials I used on these cards in the description box. And if you decide to recreate this card, please tag me at jc.gaspar and at Altenew LLC. I'd love to take a look at your projects. My series encourages you to shop your existing Altenew stash and rekindle their love with newer releases.
Let us know if this confirmation has inspired you to grab out your supplies and start making cards in bulk. Loved watching this video. There is more where that came from here on the Altenew official YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that bell button so you don't miss out on any of the crafty fun. See you soon and happy crafting.